straight to camera.
Okay.
We're talking through the camera, and I will start
Okay.
to kind of hide through it as well.
Okay.
Why don't you tell me your full name?
I'm Wayne Pacelle. That's Pacelle, and I'm President and CEO of the Humane Society of the United States.
And what does that mean? What does your job entail?
Well, the Humane Society of the United States is the nation's largest animal protection group. It was founded in 1954. I've actually been at the organization since 1994. I first came to the organization to organize its political and government affairs activities and to be the chief communications person. And then about 6 years ago, in 2004, I was elected president and CEO. And this is an organization that works to protect all animals. Our mission statement is celebrating animals and confronting cruelty. And some people assume that if you work at the Humane Society, you just deal with dogs and cats. We actually deal with all animals and all human-animal interactions. And that takes us into the realms of dogs and cats and horses, but also farm animals, animal testing, research, the use of animals in education, the use of animals in entertainment, protection of wildlife, really every single realm where humans are putting animals at risk. That includes the destruction of habitat, and it includes using animals for food, using them for sport, everything under the sun. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. We've got a staff of about 700. We've got an enormous membership base. We're so grateful to so many people across the country who care deeply about the issues and want to see a group driving social change. And it's been a real privilege for me to work for this organization for 16 years now, 6 in my capacity now.
Why is it important to have an organization like HSUS?
Well, change is never self-executing. Things just don't unfold because you want them to play out in a certain way. This country has always had a history of having people and organizations imagine an ideal and push for a new set of values that are put into practice in people's daily lives. And if you look back at this country, obviously we did some really terrible things as a country, but we changed it. We turned it around because that's the kind of people we are in this country. Slavery existed, and now, of course, it does not exist in any legal form, at the very least. And that was a bloody struggle that took 200 years to turn around. We obviously had a situation in this country where women didn't have the right to vote until the women's suffrage movement was successful in the early part of the 20th century. We've had a civil rights movement. We've had all sorts of social causes to really question the status quo and to say, hey, we can do better as a society. That we need to be really affording more consideration to a group that may not be getting the right treatment. And I think when you look at animals, I mean, obviously they cannot speak for themselves. They are almost helpless before us. The difference in power between us and them is vast. We control their destiny. We began to control the lives of many animals, certainly the domesticated animals, 10,000 years ago. When we brought them into our lives, we began to control their reproduction. And with that change in the way that animals lived comes a real responsibility for us, especially in this industrial age, when we proved a long time ago that we could liquidate animals and we can use them for whatever purpose we want. It's really, for me, about responsibility. It's really more about human behavior than it is about animal behavior. Animals just kind of want to be left alone, or they just want to be well treated, or they want to be well fed, and given an opportunity to exhibit their normal, natural range of behaviors. I don't think we're asking for much except just a common sense sort of approach to giving animals a decent life.
It seems like a hard thing for a lot of people to connect with, though, especially as you say, we've been domesticating animals for 10,000 years. There's the sense of, anything that is available to us is available to us to do what we want. And that seems to be, the idea with a lot of people that there isn't much consideration beyond man. Man is it. Man is the end of the line here. But isn't there a relationship between man's health and what's going on in the rest of the natural world?
Yeah, I don't think you can isolate our circumstance, whether from an ecological perspective or a public health perspective or even a basic attitudes orientation. What we do to animals does bleed over and spill over into other aspects of our lives. We know this to be the case with the food that we consume. When we mistreat animals, or we overcrowd them, or keep them in totally unsanitary conditions, that has implications for food safety, and that means that people can get sick, whether because of antibiotic-resistant bacteria that develop on today's factory farms, or whether it's E. coli, or whether it is salmonella, or even mad cow disease. When we look at the human circumstance in our communities, when we're being cruel to animals, and you can look back to so many thinkers who recognized this centuries ago. When we're cruel to animals, it dulls our sensibilities to humans, and violence toward animals is often an antecedent to violence against people. We also know that we're not the only species on this planet in terms of the overall ecological health. I think we need other animals in our lives. I think we need them because really in the basic DNA of human beings, we are connected to animals. You go back to hunting and gathering societies, we were very tied in with animals. Even today, the small number of communities that subsist by hunting and gathering and do not engage in agricultural practices, they have a keen understanding of animals. They know animal behavior. They actually kill animals, of course, but they feel badly about it, and they work to atone for it. They apologize to the animals. And I think if you just look at all of human history through time, there's always been a bond between humans and animals, and that bond continues today. And it's manifest in so many ways with all the pet keeping and the wildlife watching and all of the entertainment vehicles like Animal Planet we have in this day and age to nourish this instinct that we have to be connected to animals. So I think what's really important about our work at the Humane Society of the United States is that we are not inventing a concern for animals. An instinct, an inclination, a bond has always been in place from the earliest days of humanity and the earliest hominids, all through the period of hunting and gathering, through the period of domestication. We became more alienated, I think, from animals and nature during the industrial era, when some people, and a lot of the people in the world, thought of animals as commodities and as objects. But really the rise of the animal protection movement and the environmental movement in the middle part of the 19th century was a reaction to that excess, that essentially what we were doing to animals, whether it was eliminating the bison or the passenger pigeon or other wildlife, or inhumanely transporting livestock or the horse in the 19th century, the movement of animal advocates was a reaction to the failure of people to observe limits and to abide by a decent standard of conduct. And really, we've been just growing that sentiment and growing this political and social and cultural movement to enhance the place of animals and to check the excesses that people may engage in.
And you actually get into a lot of, points that I think kind of require some statistical analysis. Does the HSUS engage when it looks at the different, areas that it's going to work? Does it employ some sort of statistical analysis, or does it really kind of get in beyond, that initial, sense of compassion at the very outer portion of the engagement?
Well, any sort of change that you want to foster in society has to be grounded upon certain principles. And the principles, for us are mercy and compassion and kindness toward animals. So that's the substrate that we operate on. But I do think that if you're a mission-driven organization and you're serious-minded, you have to take a almost a business-like approach. You've got to really figure out what you want to accomplish. You've got to have a goal, and you've got to be very determined to achieve that goal. And obviously, part of the calculus has to involve how you're going to deploy finite resources. So you want to deploy those resources to get the maximum impact, given that animals, unfortunately, are suffering from human-caused cruelty all over the world. So I don't think we do a strict numerical analysis, but that is one criteria that we look at in assessing whether we want to put finite resources into a particular campaign. You obviously have to look at the possibility of progress being achieved. You have to look at the enthusiasm of your constituency for a reform. You have to look at where the funding is going to come from. So many different factors, so it's really an amalgam of all of these factors. But I would say that one of the reasons why I'm very concerned about the use of animals in food production is the number of animals is so absolutely vast.
And that kind of brings me to my next question, which is the commerce aspect of animals. You talk about the natural interaction that many different people have had over the centuries, if not millennia, and over the last 150 so years during industrialization and mechanization, that there seems to have been, the push by commerce to set aside, I guess, any kind of responsibility and just look at the dollar. Where are we kind of in that trajectory? I mean, if we look at 150 years of this type of mentality, has it really dulled the senses of most people because now everything is so commoditized?
Well, I think we in this country have always been about trying to create the society that we want. Rather than just allowing economics to totally control the circumstance. I mean, if we were just about economics in this country, we would have chattel slavery, we would have animal cruelty everywhere, we would have all sorts of other terrible things. We've never been just about economics. Economics is one element within our society that needs to be considered, and it needs to be workable in order to have a thriving capitalist economy. But any sort of capitalist economy and any advocate of that method of economic organization knows that there must be values, there must be limits, there must be ethical standards, and the economics must be balanced against the ethical considerations. And I think that in the case of animals, there are people who try to turn them into commodities, into things, and just view them as instrumentalities to advance their own economic imperatives. And of course, we say no. I mean, we just cannot be driven by a sole consideration like that. But animals actually, in some ways, if you treat them well, can actually provide economic benefits. Whale watching and other forms of wildlife watching are one of many very tangible examples of that. We see that many corporations are now exhibiting a concern for animal welfare as part of their broader corporate social responsibility mission. We think that's important because we're not...
Is that a shift as well?
I think so. I mean, I think that society just continues to change, and corporations are made up of individuals, and there are boards of directors, and there are shareholders, and those people are not immune to value-based considerations, of course, when it comes to animals. And it just requires a hard-hitting, effective, logical, science-based organization to drive the agenda and to put these issues in front of people and really to urge and plea for consideration, but to demand it when it's necessary.
And you actually, again, said science-driven. So you do really, the HSUS is propelled forward by science nuts and bolts, and it's not just all passion and compassion.
No, I mean, I think compassion and emotion and mercy, these are good values. I mean, these are the core values of any civil society. This is what underlies the law. These principles are represented in all of the world's major religions. Again, we're not inventing anything here, but when it comes to science, what we want to do is recognize that animals feel pain, that animals have certain behavioral needs, and you can measure these interests of animals through scientific study. And I think we pay great attention to these issues in order to undergird our work. And again, it's a balance of everything. It's ethics and science and economics and many other considerations. But where it all leads us is to really being responsible actors as individuals, and within a broader society, having society exhibit ethical concern for other creatures. They depend on us. They need us to be good to them, and we can do it. There's nothing about the human spirit that inhibits us from being good to other creatures.
You've been working on a number of major campaigns over the last 5 years. We last met following Hurricane Katrina. Any last thoughts on the work that HSUS did over the last 5 years following Hurricane Katrina?
Well, I think my instinct always is not just to take a major event like Katrina and put all of your stock in just the immediate rescue of the animals. You've got to really figure out what went wrong systematically and correct that for the future. So what we saw during Katrina was a very remarkable effort by so many people to try to rescue animals in distress. But you had a situation in New Orleans and other parts of the affected Southeast where government policy and personal understanding of how you handle animals in a disaster setting was rudimentary, or in some cases non-existent. We needed to turn that situation around so there's better preparedness for the future and better policy, so none of us find ourselves in the situation where you have tens of thousands of animals or hundreds of thousands of animals left behind. So we've worked very hard to re-engineer the laws and public attitudes to have a newfound understanding of what's required of us with the care of animals in the run-up to a disaster and in the immediate response once a disaster occurs. So we strengthened the federal law. It was our initiative to do that. We worked to strengthen laws in about 20 states to include pets in disaster planning. And we've worked on preparedness issues. And I think what we've done also is stitch together the narrative to show that if you don't have an effective response for the animals in a disaster setting, you undermine the effectiveness of the human response because people stay behind because of the human-animal bond. And I think we really succeeded in these last 5 years in helping to deliver that message and to advance this narrative that you can't just isolate the human concern and you can't just forget about the animals. We're all bound together in disasters. The strong winds and the waves affect us all. And our emotional ties connect us to animals, and that means that people just won't tolerate the idea of animals being left behind.
What's been the largest campaigns that you've been kind of focused on since Hurricane Katrina? Over the last 5 years, would have been the most important initiatives of the HSUS?
Well, we do a lot at HSUS. We are a very aggressive organization that also taps into mainstream sensibilities. I mean, it's really an odd sort of social movement and organization in that sense, because we really do believe that we're representing mainstream sensibilities, but we also don't just have a laissez-faire approach. We want to get things done. And I'd say that over the last 5 years, we've had a number of major campaigns. Certainly, our offensive against factory farming, the industrial production of animals for food, the confinement of animals in cages and crates barely larger than their bodies, inhumane transport, inhumane slaughter. We've done a lot on all of these fronts. We've passed ballot initiatives in Arizona and California to stop the confinement of animals on factory farms in California. We had a measure that will, when it finally takes effect, it has a little bit of a phase-in period. It will mean better lives for 20 million animals in confinement in California. We've negotiated agreements with agricultural groups in other states like Michigan and Maine. And we've also done major undercover investigations at slaughter plants and auctions and stockyards, exposing the meat industry's callous abuse of animals, dragging down animals who can't walk because they're too sick or injured, ramming them with forklifts, or even in some cases putting a high-pressure water hose in their mouth to simulate a waterboarding effect, to cause the animal so much distress to get away from their tormentors that these non-ambulatory animals would stand up and walk into the slaughter area. I'd say factory farming is a grave moral issue. It's something that affects every one of us because we're all consumers. We need to consume calories and protein and other nutrients in order to survive. And our food choices have enormous implications for animals. I'd say also we're working very hard to turn around the fur industry, really to shift away from fur coats of healthy animals and to look to natural fiber coats and synthetic coats. And we've been really campaigning hard to stop the largest marine mammal slaughter in the world, which is the killing of harp seals and hooded seals in Atlantic Canada. 300,000 seals killed each spring. And
that's coming up here shortly, isn't it?
yes, it is. It usually begins in late March and goes into April. In 2009, because we've been able to shrink markets for the product, the sealers fell well short of their quota. They killed about 70,000 seals. They had a quota of 330,000, so there were 260,000 saved because we had shrunk their markets for their product. But it remains a major fight as well as our broader efforts to challenge the fur trade. We're making a lot of progress on that issue. We're working on animal fighting, really working to eradicate dog fighting and cockfighting all across the country. We're the only group with a dedicated unit focused on eradicating these practices. We've strengthened all the laws in all the states, the federal law, and we are just absolutely committed to eliminating this form of barbarism. We work to reduce euthanasia in this country and to combat puppy mills. We've been passing laws in the states dealing with breeding practices for animals at high volume operations, which we refer to as puppy mills. And we've got a lot of other campaigns, exotic animals, trying to stop the trade in them for use as pets, stopping the wildlife trade, whether it's skins of polar bears or elephant ivory or turtle shells from endangered sea turtles. So many different things that we do every single day. There really is no organization in the world like HSUS. No group has the wealth of human resources, human assets, to attack all of these problems of human-animal relations. And it's a solemn responsibility. But we also feel like we're making great progress.
It seems like every one of those instances that you just communicated, that there is somebody on the other side, that there's somebody that wants to kill the seals, that there's somebody that wants to run factory farming. So I would imagine that you come up against all sorts of pushback, and you know, this is not how we do it. We're in the, you know, I would imagine people hide behind commerce or get behind their commerce and saying, we need this for the good of our community, or we need to do this because of this. I would imagine you're not making a lot of friends in those circles.
Yeah, well, you know, if you look to football as an analogy, we don't have a lot of open running room. We have blockers everywhere. And we have powerful, large blockers everywhere, and they've got a lot of help from politicians and corporations, and obviously we're asking people at some level to really rethink what they've been doing, which requires a lot of some people. It's not the natural inclination of everybody just to be open to change. Certainly change is the watchword of the American experience. I mean, look at how we're different from 1850 to 1900 to 1950 to 2010. I mean, our society looks so different in so many ways, whether it's telecommunications or transportation or the way we consume food, so many different elements of society. But we do have formidable opposition, and more than any other group, HSUS is the most feared by all of these industries, whether it's agribusiness or the trophy hunting lobby or the fur trade. If you look at all of their trade journals, they say HSUS is the one to worry about. And we really consider that a badge of honor.
I was going to say, you seem to relish that. I've seen the current campaign where you've been attacked in some major publications about some of your work, and I've seen your response literally tacking back. This seems to be a new battleground where we've had various philosophical battlegrounds or religious battlegrounds over our history. This seems to be a very new and important battleground that seems to be rising much, in a greater profile to most people. I think I heard last night that 5 years ago, certain legislators wouldn't listen to something. Now, not only are they listening to things, they're actually affecting change. So I'm fascinated by this initiative, this whole push. Anyway, there wasn't really a question behind that. Why don't you talk to me about puppy mills in particular, this campaign? This seems to be a fairly new phenomenon. Is this a new phenomenon? Why is this just now pretty recent in our consciousness?
Well, I don't think it's a new phenomenon. I think that it has a more prominent place in discourse now. Puppy mills have been around for decades, and they're actually one of the defining issues of the modern humane movement. And you essentially take an agricultural approach to dog breeding. You treat the dogs like agribusiness treats cows or pigs or chickens, and you rear them in confinement, and you churn out new animals in order to gain in commerce. So it is a major issue, and I think one of the reasons that we are attacking the problem is that we think it's winnable. We think we can achieve change because there is a disconnect between how people think animals, like dogs, should be treated and how they are treated on these puppy mills. I mean, it's an extraordinary circumstance. We have a society with more and more people considering dogs to be members of the family, and there's no family-like treatment of these animals on puppy mills. These animals are cogs in a commercial production effort, and we think that incongruity brings vulnerability to those operations, and we are going to try to correct the problem through educating consumers about making the right choices when it comes to acquiring an animal, about policy issues and changing the law, and really exposing what's going on. That's what we've been doing.
What's the toughest aspect of trying to get on top of this issue?
Well, I think the biggest difficulty for us is just the variety of forms of animal abuse. I mean, it just means that we can't concentrate just on one thing. If we could just focus on puppy mills, it would be much easier. If we didn't have to worry about factory farming and the fur trade and trophy hunting and organized animal fighting and the exotic wildlife trade and the abuse of animals in so many other industries. When it comes to puppy mills in particular, I would say that obviously anytime you have a lot of commercial activity and a lot of profit, there are defense mechanisms that these industries set up to thwart change and to make it more difficult, whether it's by hiring lobbyists or public relations people. And of course, in America, you also have a situation where there's a very strong ethic of private property, and a lot of people try to transfer that principle, which is a laudable principle, to their circumstance with animals. We just don't think that animals are television sets or lamps, and that there's a lot more that comes with our handling them than just treating them like a thing.
Excuse me. Talk to me about, I was in Haiti and I had an opportunity to follow a couple different groups I followed some folks from Arch. I had an opportunity to spend a little time with the HSUS and the HSI teams as well. Tell me about Haiti and about places like that. To me, based on my experience, it seemed like a lot of the problems were there before the earthquake, would be there after the earthquake. And is this really a window into potentially, having an invitation to affect change in a place like that?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we have our hands full with so many issues. So for the welfare of the people of Haiti and for so many other reasons, I mean, we of course terribly regret what happened there and wish the earthquake never occurred. It was a terrible loss of life for the people of Haiti, and it was devastating to a country that already seemed to have the odds stacked against it. But people really have an expectation, and we have a self-expectation as well, that when there's a crisis, we want to be able to pitch in and help. And Haiti's circumstance for animals was one that was very undeveloped. I mean, there's no animal welfare infrastructure in Haiti. There's not even a veterinary capacity or structure. There's no veterinary school. There are no humane societies, no SPCAs. And we really wanted to respond and to help the animals that were in crisis. But we also saw it, again, because our thinking always moves to the long term. We saw it as an opportunity to begin to develop some basic humane infrastructure so there would be in-country mechanisms to handle animal welfare issues and to provide some instruction and guidance to people in their own care of animals. So whether it's the livestock sector or pets or some other sector, we want to really be more cognizant of what can work in that country in the future. So our hope was not just to respond to the animals in crisis, and one circumstance we had is that pet keeping is not that big an issue in Haiti compared to many other countries, so there weren't as many pets at risk as there may have been in other countries. But there are animals there, and again, the human-animal bond crosses economic lines and national boundaries, and the animals there need decent consideration too.
I believe, this human-animal intersection is a place that we can actually witness our evolution in real time. I think there's very few places that we can do it, but there's so many different places where humans and animal intersect across the globe, and all of them are at different, points in the, in the what we'll call an evolution. If we look at here in the U.S. as being a little bit more aware and places less aware. I was fascinated in a place like Haiti, the conditions, but at the same time it is status quo. It's normal for the people there, and there didn't seem to be any lack of care for the animals when people would when we'd have vet care come in and to help out. It just seemed to be that their own level of participation in the human animal was what it was.
Well, there's a human animal bond. There's no question about it. I think that we are instinctively drawn to other animals. Now, other factors can overcome that, and culture is a very powerful force that can trump these instinctive, empathetic concerns we have for other creatures, and that's why we need guidance, and that's why people need alternatives, and they need options. But I think in Haiti you do have a case example of a nation without a lot of instruction and a lot of guidance when it comes to how animals should be treated, and you see some of the natural inclinations at work, unfortunately layered over a poverty-stricken nation where people are kind of trying to scrape by to make ends meet.
All right, let's jump north to Canada, where you don't have any of those things, really. You have a fairly wealthy country, a fairly knowledgeable country, one that is fairly self-aware and aware of the globe around it. What is seal hunting about?
Well, in any country of some level of wealth, any industrialized country, you have different levels of education and class, and you have parochialism And I think what we have with the seal hunt is a long tradition of killing seals, and it was just part of the culture. It was part of the economy, and it's been difficult to turn that around. Now, let's be clear: the seals are not used for meat or fur locally. This is not a subsistence hunt. It hasn't been a subsistence hunt for an awfully long time. This is an effort to engage in global commerce and to exploit a natural resource of Canada. And I think that there are political explanations for it, why the government of Canada supports this activity that occurs in just a small geographic area. Has to do with the political balance of power in Canada and not wanting to alienate the people who do believe in this and who have been profiting from it for quite a long time. But unfortunately, we don't have many cases where we have a perfect sort of ethical examination of issues, and I think there's just a lot of knee-jerk opposition to efforts to change the circumstance for animals. It's a shame because it is a magical wildlife spectacle to have 6 million seals come down from Greenland, down the Atlantic coast of Canada, and give birth on these ice floes. And it should be something that should be celebrated. It should not be a place where men gather to kill these helpless animals.
Yeah, it definitely fascinates me too. And you used the word belief, that there's maybe a belief system that something should happen, and you also talked about it being a cultural issue. Where do you draw a line and say, well, we believe that this cultural issue that may have been with these people for so long should be changed, a la the sacrificial slaughter of 200,000 animals this past year in every 4 or 5 years ritual in another part of the country, where the whole idea is to sacrifice these animals for the betterment of people, which has been a cultural institution for a long time. Where do you decide that cultural institution is no longer valid?
Well, I do believe that we're seeking more of a universal sort of sensibility that animals should be properly treated. Issues of human abuse really are not going to be quelled because someone says it is in our cultural experience to do this, whether it is child abuse or slavery. We don't really say, okay, well, you get a pass on it because you've been doing it for a long time. I think with animals it's more complicated than that, but the general principle still applies, that we would like to see a more universal application of the principles of compassion and mercy and kindness. So, I think that you run into problems when you try to say that people in Arctic communities who are living a hunting and gathering lifestyle can't kill seals. But I think it's an entirely different circumstance when you have people killing seals by the hundreds of thousands and selling their products in global commerce. That is not a local use of the animals, and it is an entirely different moral question.
One moment. Stephanie, she's got to catch a plane this morning.
Okay, so
You're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay.
I'm always curious where, not only what you're attacking, but where that line kind of gets hit, and is attacking a cultural institution, attacking a commercial entity. Again, you're not making a lot of friends in the world in certain areas, but it seems like you're making a lot of friends with the general population of the world. And it seems like you're using that as your baseball bat to swing back.
Well, we're really about making friends with everybody. I mean, we really do want everyone to believe these sensibilities. But we also do believe that when you can't convince someone just through normal dialogue, and when they've put up resistance, that you do have to confront these questions. These are urgent moral questions. They cannot wait 50 years for people to change their views or an innovation to occur that would make it even easier or more profitable for them to handle a certain situation. So we're working hard to try to reach agreement and consensus, but where we can't, then we have the application of pressure. And that's what happens in a civil society. You have debate and discourse, and that's why we have principles of the First Amendment, and that's why we try to keep the discussion going within civil institutions. Lawmaking bodies are built around taking many conflicting viewpoints and then trying to address them in some way. So we do have a lot of friends, and we do have some folks who don't like what we're doing, but that's the nature of our work.
I've seen recently some of the attack ads again against HSUS and what you're doing, and I've seen your response. Why don't you kind of go into that a little bit and maybe get me caught up where this little battle is taking place? And quite frankly, I appreciate you as a public speaker, and I've yet to really tap into the other side, but I'd love to, if you're interested, maybe schedule a debate against and with any of your detractors or those people. And it seems like you might be game for that sort of thing, to actually meet people who are of a different mindset and that are literally trying to be that block against what it is that you're trying to do. Get me caught up with the current situation.
Well, as we have continued to become more effective at campaigning for change, we're seeing more blockers emerge. And sometimes these blockers take unfamiliar forms, or they fabricate an organization in order to hide really where the money's coming from, because it's all about money for these industries. They are concerned that we threaten their bottom line, that the change that we want is going to mean that they're not going to make as much money from exploiting animals. So we've had this all along. I mean, ever since I started actively campaigning and really pushing the envelope, whether it's outlawing cockfighting or upgrading laws against dogfighting or taking on the trophy hunting lobby or factory farming or the exotic animal trade, they've all been upset with our approach. Because
do you try to walk in the door initially and say, "Hi, I'm Wayne. In essence, I'm Wayne Pacelle with the HSUS. We'd like to have a conversation with you before we join a campaign against you"?
We always want to give people the option to figure out a pathway where everyone's a winner, and that doesn't mean that there's no sacrifice involved, or that some of this is not difficult in terms of change. But we always want to achieve our ends short of confrontation. But if confrontation must occur, then we work it within the bounds of socially acceptable discourse and within institutions like lawmaking bodies or corporate structures and the court of public opinion. But we're committed to it, and we think, again, the groups that rise up and try to caricature the work of HSUS or misrepresent who we are, what we believe, they're just trying to campaign in their own way. Unfortunately, we think sometimes they leave truth at the door.
Give me, for instance, in this last attack, for instance, who was it? Who was behind it, and what were they trying to? In essence, they were trying to really tear down your initiative, correct?
Well, there's a group that calls itself the Center for Consumer Freedom. They're a nonprofit, although they have no social welfare purpose. They don't house one homeless person or shelter one animal or help cure one disease. They have no social welfare mission. And the man who started it basically has seen an opportunity to make money by allowing corporations to fund his campaigns against public interest causes. And it started with Philip Morris giving money to this group to attack anti-smoking advocates, and then the alcohol industry gave it money to attack mothers against drunk driving. And essentially he developed this little formulaic sort of plan so he could enrich himself, and these corporations could have somebody to do their attack work. So it served both of those purposes.
So it's really one person or a small group of people that are basically, in essence, getting lobbying money to attack you.
Well, it's one individual who's developed an enrichment scheme for himself that trades on the fears and the anxiety that certain corporate interests have over our work. So he couldn't operate if you didn't have the Farm Bureau very concerned about our anti-factory farming work, or the fur trade concerned about our anti-sealing work, or the trophy hunting lobby concerned about our efforts to stop the import of polar bear trophies into the United States, or the cockfighters concerned about our efforts to eradicate their industry. So they're just trading on the fears and the economic interests of all of these different industries. And their attempt is to try to attack the messenger. They know they can't win a debate with us, with the American public, really on any of these issues. We've proved that through our successful ballot initiatives in California and Washington and Massachusetts and Florida and so many different states. So their goal is to try to discredit us, and essentially what they try to do is misrepresent who we are. We never have said that we run all the animal shelters in the country. We've never said that our goal is just animal rescue. Animal rescue is a very important and very substantial piece of our broader animal welfare portfolio. But we've always been about fundamental change, about changing the laws, about changing corporate behavior, about changing minds and attitudes in the American consciousness. And we do that through many different means, all of which are entirely transparent on our website and our publications. We shout from the rooftops that we want these reforms for all animals, and we trumpet the idea of getting involved in our cause. But somehow this group thinks that we're vulnerable because we don't spend all of our money giving grants to local humane societies. When I talk about our work and talk about how we do work for all animals and how it takes so many forms, that strengthens our connection to people. That strengthens our connection to donors. So we see this campaign against us really as an opportunity to really educate the public about who we are, because we are so proud of what we do. This is the group that must exist in a society to confront these problems. If you didn't have a group like HSUS, then society wouldn't have a capability that it must have to address these problems. We think the public is not only with us on our core message and our core values about protecting all animals, but is enthusiastic about it. So we're not going to be deterred. We've been attacked from the very beginning. We'll be attacked throughout the process. And it's an opportunity for us to really shine.
I actually did see that as an opportunity in your responses that I'd read following those attack ads, and I found it to be quite brilliant to literally just go face forward and say, here's what we believe, and and why, and why we're being attacked. And I like how you really kind of turned it around and said, well, it gives us, in essence, validity, the fact that somebody wants to attack us, we must be doing something right. But
and people, urgency is also an issue with philanthropy and volunteerism. I mean, people rush in when they see a threat. So obviously a circumstance like Katrina, when animals are threatened, then people rush in and help. Well, we're saying, hey, we're under attack. These people are only attacking us because they know that we're threatening what is going on here. So we must be doing something right. We must be saving a lot of animals for these people to react in this way. So that is a validation of our work. Support it. Don't let these people win. Let us win, and give us the opportunity to do even more in order to confront these problems.
During this past year, you initiated what turned out to be a fairly controversial relationship that I think took a lot of people, a lot of your constituents by surprise, a lot of your old staunch constituents, and that was, bringing Michael Vick into the fold in terms of, having him be a speaker. Talk to me about that. I'm sure you've taken a lot of flack and you've heard a lot of different feedback, even in your own house, about, about that aspect. How does that work, and what's the value to all sides?
Well, there's no group that has a stronger record in combating dogfighting than HSUS. I mean, it's just not even close. I mean, we have almost single-handedly, as an organization, rewritten the laws of America when it comes to organized animal fighting. We've trained thousands of law enforcement officials. We've raided hundreds of operations with law enforcement. We have really underscored and highlighted this problem in America. And Michael Vick would never have gone to jail but for our work. We passed the federal law under which he was prosecuted. And when the case came to light, we provided crucial informants and information that resulted in his successful prosecution. So we wanted to see him incarcerated. We wanted to see that outcome because he should not have been allowed to get away with the terrible crimes against animals he committed. But he did serve his time, and that's the way the system works. And when he came out of jail and said that he had a lot of time to reflect on the issue and he wanted to get involved, I said, well, that's really what HSUS is about. We're about change. We're about taking the ex-trophy hunter and turning him into a wildlife advocate. We're about taking the ex-factory farmer and turning him into an advocate for a better sort of agriculture that we can conduct. That is what we are about through and through. There's nothing more basic than people doing better on a personal level. We are all sinners when it comes to animals, every single one of us. I started off as an animal-loving kid whose uncle got him a dog from a pet store who was from a puppy mill. We tethered our dog when I was a kid. I ate products from factory farms. I didn't do it knowingly. I didn't do it because I had a malicious sort of component of my body, but I did it. And if someone had said to me, well, you're a bad person because you weren't fully aware or you didn't act in the right way, then we treat that person like a static individual. And we're about giving people opportunities to do better. And you don't just test that principle in the easy cases, you test it with the hard cases, with the toughest cases. And if someone like Michael Vick, who's involved in dogfighting, it's very easy to pillory him forever. And we could have done that, and for a time, of course, we were his biggest critics. But when he said he wanted to do better, I thought, well, that's what we're about. We're helping him get there to be a better person so that he doesn't engage in this activity again. And maybe we can use him as an instrument to reach young kids who had the same set of cultural experiences that drew him into the quicksand of dogfighting. So, yes, I knew I would take a lot of flack for allowing him to participate in some of our community-based events to reach young kids in urban communities who don't have enough of this dialogue about why animal cruelty is wrong. But I thought that as someone with his background, having gone through what he did, coming from the streets of Southern Virginia, growing up in a poverty-stricken community, with his celebrity and his athletic background, he could reach kids in a better way than we could, and that would achieve our goal. The goal is to eradicate dogfighting, and the goal is to prevent kids from getting involved before they square up their animals in a pit, whether it's in a back alley or an abandoned building or in a professional dogfighting ring. So I think it was absolutely the right decision. It's consistent with everything we're about, which is making people better. If Michael Vick reneges on his promise or if he gets back into the game, there'll be no group that rises in angrier defense of animals, that will be more unforgiving in our running people like that back into jail. But if people want to do better, you've got a place at the Humane Society. We will help you get better. We will help you be better when it comes to caring for animals.
Along those same lines, when it comes to some of the other major targets that might be actually industries or larger organizations, I know you battle them on a number of different fronts, whether it's public opinion or trying to uncover unsavory practices. Do you take the same, do you invest anything, for instance, in potentially looking at an industry and saying, not only do we just not want to do this, we actually have a better idea for you. We've looked at this and we say, if you do this way, this way, this way, and this way. So is part of what you're going to be doing, and are you creating relationships that, or at least if the relationship can take place, that you're ready to go, okay, we have better ideas for you. We think you can do what you're doing better.
Yeah, we don't want to just wrestle people to the ground morally. We want to give them a new pathway to succeed that doesn't involve animal exploitation. So we really do want people to do better. And if we can solve the problem that provides a win for animals and a win for them, that's the greatest of all outcomes, because then they feel good about the outcome, and you don't get the situation where you then have a backlash and you have a back and forth. So seal clubbing is a great example. I mean, trying to develop a seal watching and a wildlife appreciation economy is a very viable and real alternative to killing these seals. And it's just like the great herds of wildebeest and zebras and elephants on the African plains of Kenya and Tanzania. You can shoot those animals and have sport hunting, or you can have wildlife watching, which can involve a lot more people and a lot more commerce. And I think that's the pathway on so many fronts.
What about factory farming? How do you apply that to that? What would be some of the institutional changes that would make sense, that would benefit them as well as benefit this human-animal relationship?
Well, agriculture in general has suffered as a consequence of factory farming. There's been a consolidation that has resulted in the loss of small farmers, and a lot of these factory farms are really not people. These are just corporations operating from afar, making business decisions and just looking at the bottom line. It's also just not sustainable. I mean, it's not good for the communities where these factory farms operate. It drops property values. It diminishes the quality of life because the groundwater is polluted, the air is putrefied. It's bad for public health. It leads to really terribly virulent pathogens like MRSA, these types of pathogens that are very threatening to human health. And it's just bad for animals. It's just bad all the way around. And the strongest case against almost any form of abuse is the case against factory farming. It connects on the environment and public health and the rural economy, rural way of life. I mean, it's not a great outcome to have these factory farms in rural hamlets in America. They are not good community neighbors. They are not good partners. So I think we see a much more diversified agriculture, and we see more agricultural producers, and we see efficiency, but we also see proper care of animals.
Do you see down the road any time actually getting involved with maybe creating an oversight board that you've got to get the HSUS seal approval of farming, things like that? Do you assign like a accreditation or a certification or a best of class type of thing to various groups? And
well, consumers need guidance. When you go into the marketplace now and purchase animal products, they have almost no guidance when it comes to how the animals are treated. So we're actually involved with a group, Global Animal Partnership, and we're starting with Whole Foods, having a rating system for animal products. And consumers can go and get guidance on what the welfare standards were for the animal production practices at the farms that led to this food coming to the marketplace. So consumers need information in order to make the right choices. And in the absence of information, then you just have kind of an opportunity for factory farmers to sneak in.
Do you see that maybe applying over across the board to all food, just like we have, calorie counts and we have various warnings based on certain materials in there? Do you think there will be potentially a day where all food products that contain animals will have to have that type of listing as well, how the animals were treated or caught or disposed of or however?
Well, I certainly see an arc and a trajectory. More informed consumers are going to make better choices. And I think corporations must respond to consumers. And as consumers demand it, corporations will respond. So I do see change in this regard, and I think it's change for the good.
We're almost done here. I think I've got the majority, but I do have a couple of questions. I had been requested, quite a few people knew that I was going to be doing this profile interview, animal rescuers and so on. There are quite a few, not quite a few, there are many smaller rescuers that, or people that consider themselves animal advocates that kind of see you as big brother, and that, why them and why can't I do? How do you address your detractors within the ranks, if you will?
I think that any social movement is going to have, a certain amount of strife. I mean, there are going to be differences in tactics, and there are going to be differences in scale, and there are going to be differences in basic approach and strategy. And I think there's a natural inclination when you don't know the individual sometimes, or when you don't have interactions and maybe see how they're thinking about their own strategic development, the priorities that they set. They think, well, why aren't they focusing on what we want to focus on? Or why are they giving us attention? And it's really not a lack of respect. It's just a focus in trying to attack the problem that we've identified. And I cherish our brethren and our sisters within the cause of animal protection. And among the massive group of animal rescuers out there, I think they're among the most self-sacrificing, remarkable people. And some of them may be critics of us, but sometimes I don't even know what their concern is about. And I look forward to addressing those issues with people who are committed to the same principles that I am and that the organization represents. Now, that doesn't mean that we can do everything that everybody wants to do. We have to run an operation that is trying to achieve the maximum benefit for animals. And in any group with a lot of people, there are a lot of different ideas, there are a lot of different ways you can go, and you have to make choices. You have to lead, and you have to figure out your pathway, and that may not be the one that others choose, and people may feel aggrieved by that in some way, but really we're trying to do the best we can for animals. We work all the time. We work very, very hard. And I think if you look at the overall set of outcomes, HSUS is without question the group that's having the biggest impact on the greatest number of animals, and it's taking on large-scale institutionalized cruelty. We're not just about animal rescue, and animal rescue is vital, and I celebrate every individual who's involved in animal rescue. It is often a thankless job. It is. It can also be very rewarding in seeing the animal survivors of these processes. But our goal as HSUS has never been just to address the symptoms of the problem, but to address the root causes. And in that complementarity between the folks who are focusing on the animals in crisis and need and our work, which is overlapping but also complementary in attacking the root causes, that's vital for our movement. And anyone who's involved in animal rescue knows that someone's got to try to turn off the spigot because we just can't be chasing animals down the street. every day. We've got to find out why they're homeless to begin with. We've got to find out why animals are suffering in food production systems and what the root cause is. We've got to get to the root.
Will you be observing the seal hunt this year? Will there be actual HSUS eyes on what's taking place?
We have a seal watch and a seal hunt watch program, and we will. Unfortunately, the ice flows are dramatically reduced this year, and a lot of the seals are going to drown. Yet Canada continues to persist with the hunt. We'll be there to document it to the greatest extent possible, given the difficult ice conditions that will exist.
And it's something that takes place over a very short period of time. Is that correct?
It's a few weeks of killing. It's a spasm of killing, and they get the pups when they're most vulnerable, typically before they're able to swim, and they have no defenses.
Very good. What is on tap? You have the Puppy Mill Initiative. You got a few other initiatives. What other major initiatives potentially are coming up? And then where do you see HSUS 5-10 years down the road?
Well, we're very focused on our core campaigns: puppy mills and pet overpopulation, animal fighting, and a zero tolerance policy for animal cruelty, factory farming. The abuse of hunting practices like canned hunts and bear baiting and contest shoots and hound hunting and lots of other terrible practices, fox pinning. We're just going to continue on. These are not issues that can just be solved overnight, and we're going to work hard to fight in the future.
Okay. I guess I have one other thing. When I was down in Haiti too, I made a stop in Santo Domingo, and I was surprised actually to see an ESPN show on cockfighting. And it just, I'm sure you've seen all kinds. I'm fairly new to this, and I'm really an outsider, and so everything to me is brand new. And so I just thought it was very interesting that there's cockfighting rings all along, the whole country, and then they have this show that celebrates cockfighting with an audience and the whole thing, like it was a bowling show or baseball. Will you be exporting what it is I know there's an HSI and there's a relationship between the two, but will HSUS become a much more global entity?
Mm-hmm. Well, cockfighting was legal in the United States just until a few years ago, until we worked to ban it. Our interest is global when it comes to stopping organized animal fighting, and we will be working hard all across the world to stop it. We recognize that animal cruelty does not stop at the boundary of the United States. That's why we have our international division, Humane Society International, which is one of our fastest growing divisions. In an era of globalization and global trade and global commerce in animals, it would be a dereliction of duty for us not to have capabilities across the world. So we are working hard. That means that our members need to continue to support our work because we know how to get the job done. And we'll continue to do it. We'll fight zealously for animal protection. We believe in these values. And it's really just a resource limitation that prevents us from doing even more.
Is there any parting thing that you'd like to share, anything that I may have missed?
I think we covered a lot of it. Yeah.
I appreciate your time. I went a little bit over, and I kept looking over.